Welcome to Nate's Haunted Hour, where the shadows come alive and the stories of the unknown take hold of your soul. Before we dive into tonight's terrors, make sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button, if you dare. Beware, dear listener, for once you enter, there's no turning back. So turn down the lights and prepare yourself for the fright of your life. You're in for an hour of chills, thrills, and tales that haunt the darkest corners of your mind. This is Nate's Haunted Hour. And don't forget, subscribing may just keep the spirits at bay. For now. Shadows of the Bocage. Chapter 1. The Night of Escape. The Bocage Plantation was a prison draped in the guise of beauty. Its fields of cotton stretched like a deceptive mirage under the oppressive August sun. For Clara, each sunrise was a bitter reminder of her chains. It was 1861, and with the echoes of rebellion and unrest growing louder, the dream of freedom seemed within reach, if only she could survive the escape. The night of her escape came wrapped in a heavy, suffocating darkness. Clara had waited months for this moment. The house was silent, asleep, while the distant sounds of crickets and frogs concealed her careful steps across the back garden. Before her lay the fields she had worked for years, stretching endlessly under a pale, sickly half-moon. Shadows hung thick in the air, but beyond them lay freedom, if she could make it past the swamp, beyond the ghostly outlines of the woods. Her heart pounded in her chest as she moved swiftly through the rows of cotton, her breath quickening with each step. She had heard stories, whispers shared late at night in the bunkhouse, out of earshot of the overseer, about the spirits that haunted the Bocage. These restless souls, it was said, were the remnants of those who had attempted to flee, only to fail and perish. They were trapped forever by the land that had enslaved them. Clara had dismissed these tales as just that, stories meant to scare. But now, as the stillness around her deepened and the shadows seemed to shift and swirl, those tales felt all too real. She reached the edge of the cotton fields, the air around her growing thick and humid, almost suffocating. Glancing back at the looming plantation house, its windows dark and hollow, she felt an unsettling sense that it was watching her, waiting for her to falter. The wind rustled through the trees, but something else moved with it, faint, sorrowful whispers that didn't belong to the living. Clara froze, listening. There it was again, the soft murmurs, like voices carried on the wind. But these were not the voices of people. Cold dread seeped into her bones as she realized that the stories may have been more than mere superstition. The shadows between the trees seemed to move, forming shapes that wavered like figures cloaked in black. She swallowed her fear and pressed forward, forcing her legs to carry her toward the swamp. The water lay just ahead, black and still beneath the moonlight. Clara had planned to follow its edge, believing it to be her best hope for staying hidden. But just as she reached the bank, a sudden splash shattered the silence, followed by an agonized wail. Clara's blood ran cold. She froze in her tracks, her heart racing as her eyes scanned the water for the source of the sound. But nothing moved. The swamp was still, unnervingly still. "Don't turn back," Clara whispered to herself, though terror gnawed at the edges of her mind. "You're almost free." She took a tentative step forward, then another, but the air grew colder, and the ground beneath her feet seemed slick with moisture that hadn't been there moments before. A presence lingered, watching, following. The shadows twisted along the tree line, shifting and swelling like spirits. Suddenly, something cold and slimy brushed against her ankle. Clara gasped and jumped back, her heart leaping into her throat. She looked down and her breath caught in her chest. A pale, shriveled hand, slick with dark muck, was reaching out from the water. Slowly, a figure began to rise, its eyes hollow, its skin tight and gray, like a corpse pulled from the depths. It moved with unnatural intent, its mouth stretching wide in a soundless scream. More figures began to emerge from the swamp. Gaunt, grotesque, their rotting clothes clinging to decayed flesh, dripping with stagnant water. Clara recognized them with a growing horror. These were the lost souls, the ones who had tried to escape before her, only to be caught and dragged to their deaths. Now they had risen, cursed to haunt the bocage for eternity,